They spoke of the deep places of the ocean with a reverence no mortal could understand. To them, the sea was not a boundary but a kingdom into which all their kind would someday return. The shadow over Innsmouth. Before we start, hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. It helps us bring you more real cases, more research, and more stories that challenge what we think we know. I walked into this story long before I ever understood the price of knowing too much. And even now, after everything that happened, after everything I became, I can still trace it back to a single question. A question that should have stopped me. A question that should have sent me anywhere else but Innsmouth. What secrets could a dying coastal town possibly hide that would make the federal government erase it from the map? I should have ignored the rumors. I shouldn't have visited those archives in Newburyport. I shouldn't have boarded that bus. But I did. And because of that, Innsmouth fell. And I followed it into the dark. It started in 1927, when strange federal agents swept into the region at night and vanished entire families. Fishermen were dragged out in shackles. Houses detonated. Prison ships sailed out carrying people who never resurfaced. Authorities said nothing. Not a single explanation. New England whispered about contamination, a plague, witchcraft, but no one dared speak too loudly. Not about Innsmouth, not about the Marsh family, not about Devil Reef. The truth is that I was the reason for that investigation. I was the one who raised the alarm, and I did it because I barely escaped that place alive. But before the terror, there was only curiosity. Traveling through New England, I first heard about Innsmouth from a tired ticket agent who seemed almost relieved to warn me away from it. He talked about its isolation, its rot, its uncanny decline after an 1846 epidemic that nobody could explain. He talked about the Marsh family, wealthy as kings, secretive as priests. He talked about the strange Innsmouth look, as he called it. Bulging eyes, sallow skin, a rubbery sheen that clung to certain residents. He spoke of foreign bloodlines, oceanic obsessions, rituals whispered through entire generations. Most people would have turned around right there. I went looking for records. In Newburyport's Historical Society, I found the first object that made my blood run cold. A tiara. Not gold, not silver, not any metal forged by human hands. Its curves were aquatic, grotesquely beautiful, disturbingly alive, and Miss Tilton, the curator, insisted it was simply pirate treasure. She also confirmed, with a certain stiffness in her voice, that Innsmouth's dominant religion was no Christian church. It was the esoteric order of Dagon, a cult, a replacement for every chapel they'd once had, and it had coincided with the sudden return of miraculous fishing harvests that saved the town from collapse. Everything suggested something deeply wrong beneath the surface, and instead of turning back, I bought a ticket to Innsmouth. The bus was barely holding itself together, much like the driver, Joe Sargent, whose face carried every deformity I'd been warned about. The farther we traveled along the empty coast, the more the world seemed to thin out. Farms gave way to marshland. Marshland gave way to barren fields. By the time the bus crested a hill and dropped into the valley, Innsmouth emerged like a dead organism clinging to the rocks. A stench of rotting fish coated the air. Buildings sagged against one another. Streets stretched out like ribs of some bleached carcass. And the few people I saw, they watched me with unblinking amphibian eyes. Still, I walked its streets. I noted the boarded mansions, the abandoned churches, the shuttered houses where something moved behind warped curtains. And then for the first time I saw him. A priest walking beneath a collapsing cupola, wearing a tiara identical to the one in the museum. I should have left then. Instead, I kept digging. At the town's small grocery, the only non-local clerk gave me what advice he could without outright panicking. He warned me about the order, about their festivals, about their strange processions to Devil Reef, about families who'd taken the promise, a word he whispered like a curse. He spoke of immortality, not metaphorical, physical. And the price for it, he said, was no less than humanity. But the darkest truth in Innsmouth didn't come from a clerk. It came from a drunk, Zadok Allen, 96 years old, the only man willing to talk. once whiskey loosened the past. I walked him to an abandoned wharf, gave him the bottle, and he gave me his soul. He told me about Captain Obed Marsh, who had sailed the South Pacific and met islanders who worshipped amphibious sea beings, beings that granted wealth in exchange for sacrifices and breeding. Obed brought their rites home to Innsmouth, taught the town to summon them, formed the esoteric Order of Dagon, and when some resisted, the creatures rose from the water and wiped them out. Zadok said they were immortal. They lived in underwater cities. Their hybrid offspring walked the land for years before returning to the sea as something else entirely. The Marsh family, he said, was full of these hybrids, half human, half something else. Then his voice fractured. He spoke of ceremonies on Devil Reef, of disappearances, of monstrous births. He mentioned a word I had never heard, but one that made the wind recoil: Shoggoths. And then he stopped speaking because something, he insisted, was watching from the water. He ran. I ran too, but toward escape, or what I thought would be escape. The bus to Arkham had been sabotaged. I had no choice but to stay the night at the Gilman House, a hotel that felt hollowed out from the inside. The walls sweated moisture. The floors groaned. The silence was predatory. By midnight, someone tried unlocking my door, then another door, then another. Lights went out. Voices, croaking, wet, half-formed, whispered through the halls. The door frame trembled under careful, patient pressure. I fled through the adjoining rooms, smashed a window, tied together thick curtains, and lowered myself into the shadows outside. The hunt had already begun. Innsmouth was awake. Dozens of figures roamed the streets, some nearly human, others far from it. Lanterns flashed toward Devil Reef. Signals went up from the Gilman cupola, and from the shore came the sound of swimmers, many swimmers. I moved through alleys, mimicked the hunched Innsmouth gate when I had to cross open ground, and made my way to the abandoned railway station. There, I followed a ruined track into the brush, collapsing near the road to Rowley. I thought I was safe. Then I heard it. A chorus of croaks and guttural barks. Dozens, then hundreds. Heavy, wet footsteps slapping mud. The smell, overpowering. Organic. Ancient. Something enormous moved through the darkness. Against every desperate instinct I looked. A procession of deep ones crossed the tracks in front of me. Gray-green bodies, gills opening and closing. Webbed limbs dragging through mud. Staring eyes reflecting the moon like dead lanterns. Some wore robes. Some wore tiaras. One still wore tatters of human clothing. I don't remember collapsing, only the silence after. When I woke, it was day. I stumbled to Rowley. And from there, to the authorities. What came next, the world called a government investigation. But it was a purge, a cleansing, a cover-up. They took people from their homes. They flooded tunnels. They dynamited Devil Reef, and they wiped Innsmouth off the maps. I should have been relieved. I should have felt victorious. But Arkham had one more truth waiting for me. In the genealogical records, I discovered the Marsh name in my own bloodline. My great-grandmother was one of them. The jewelry she left behind matched the designs from Innsmouth. And when I returned home to Ohio, family photographs began revealing what I had refused to see. The eyes, the expressions, the heritage. At first I fought it, told myself it was superstition, trauma, but then came the dreams. At first they were faint, then vivid, then undeniable. Cities beneath the waves, pillars older than the continents, the deep ones swimming around me like kin. And in the deepest dream I met my grandmother, transformed. Radiant in her grotesque immortality, she spoke of Ya'anthlai, the underwater city. She spoke of the rise to come. She told me I belonged with them. And behind her I saw something shifting, a Shoggoth, alive with eyes that were not eyes. When I woke, the mirror confirmed the truth. The Innsmouth look had come for me. For months I tried to resist. Then resistance became fear. Fear became longing. I stopped dreaming of escape and started dreaming of the sea. Its call felt like gravity, like destiny. And now there is only one path left. My cousin, locked away in a sanitarium, has the same blood. The same change has begun. I will free him. We will return to Innsmouth, what's left of it. We will swim to Devil Reef under moonlight, and together we will descend into the abyss, into the city that has waited for us since before we were born. Yantlai calls. The sea calls. And I understand now. I always belonged to it.